In this chapter, Harry learns how to make a Patronus, which becomes very important in our story, through which we get a ton of backstory and foreshadowing at the same time. Plus, Oliver Wood reminds us all that Quidditch is life. Oh, and Harry gets his Firebolt back. Hi, and welcome to Belated Binge, Harry Potter, the podcast that doesn't take itself or the books too seriously. I'm Zach, your host. I didn't read this series till my mid-20s, and now I'm here so that you can relive your favorite books as an adult with an affinity for sarcasm. Today, we pick back up with Prisoner of Azkaban, Chapter 12, The Patronus.
The Belated Binge Podcast.
Before we start, spoilers, obviously. Language, yeah, maybe. Shout out to the Bonus Binge Squad on Patreon. If you want to hear these episodes like right after I record them instead of waiting for them to release to the general public, and also bonus episodes with some other cool benefits too. Check out patreon.com/belatedbinge. And in case you were obliviated or you got your Hogwarts letter late, let's shove our faces in that white, liquidy substance of our pensive. In chapter 11, the last chapter that we read, it was called The Firebolt. Our trio spent some time with Hagrid, and they came away promising to help him with his case. The one about Buckbeak, trying to make sure that the ministry doesn't, murder Buckbeak. Harry also got a new broomstick for Christmas called the Firebolt. Crookshanks tried to kill Scabbers again, or at least so Ron thought. And after lunch with the professors, a ton of foreshadowing, Professor McGonagall takes the Firebolt away to check it for jinxes. And now the boys are mad at Hermione for telling her about it. But she's worried that the broom came from Sirius Black. And it's a big old murder stick. And that is where we left off. So, shall we? Priori. In conceptor. This is the part where our wands connect. Not the tips, just the streams, so that we can recap what went down in the chapter that we just read. This week, chapter 12, The Patronus. In this chapter, well, Ron and Harry are still mad at Hermione about the broom. And they're worried about how it being stripped down and violated by Professor McGonagall and Flitwick. The teachers that are just trying to make sure that the broom's not going to kill Harry. That whole thing. They're really worried about how this process is going to affect the greatest broom in the world. And Hermione doesn't really come around anymore because this is the end of the holidays and it's still just them in the castle. So it makes it even more awkward that she's been isolated from her friends over a wooden broom stick. Come on. You'll get there. Yeah. Nope, probably not. Inappropriate jokes do not belong in a kid's book series, or so they tell me. Actually, I don't know if anybody has ever told me that, because I think they totally do belong here, as long as we keep them tasteful. Wood, speaking of, Oliver Wood, was about to kick Harry off the Quidditch team. He sat him down when everybody came back from the holiday break, and he seems to be about to tell him that he has to replace him as Seeker because of the Dementor problem. Like, hey, this kid was attacked by Dementors who weren't supposed to be there in our last match, and it made us lose, and that's your fault, Harry. You shouldn't have passed out. You should have caught the snitch. So we need somebody else that's not going to crumple under the extreme pressure of the Dementors to catch that damn snitch. Yeah. But he did take comfort in Harry saying that he's actually starting lessons with Professor Lupin to help him keep those Dementors at bay. And he also got very excited about the Firebolt. Very, very excited indeed. I would say he probably resembled the broomstick handle at the Firebolt, he's decided that he is also just the person that it's going to take to get Professor McGonagall to change her mind about the safety of said broom, because Quidditch is life. Classes are now back in session as well, and Ron reminds us all about Remus Lupin, the teacher, being ill. And Hermione makes a little snarky laugh in a comment about knowing what's wrong with Lupin. And so this is one of those things, right? Like, I feel like it's all Ron and Harry's fault for the rift in the friendship right now. They are to blame because of the way that they have treated Hermione since the Firebolt incident. It's their fault. But she's not exactly innocent in the aftermath here. Because when Ron says, hey, what do you think is wrong with Lupin? She basically laughs at them and kind of antagonizes them and teases them a little bit about not being able to figure it out because, well, it's obvious, isn't it? And we know that she knows exactly what's wrong with Lupin. She's put that together for a little while. She just hasn't said anything. And you kind of wonder if she would have if they weren't in this little three-way spat as friends. But alas, we'll never know. The main thing that we care about in this chapter is the one-on-one lesson with Lupin. There's actually a couple of them, but the first one is kind of our introduction to Dementor training, which is actually going to be what we focus on during the Lumos segment of this episode. But the cliff notes for that first lesson are that Lupin has tracked down another boggart in the castle that he's going to use as a stand-in for a Dementor. It takes Harry a few tries before he's able to make a silvery, wispy, cloudy Patronus that kind of like holds the Dementor off for a second, the fake Dementor. And throughout the lesson, we get some backstory about Harry's parents through what he hears when he's fighting the fake Dementor, and Lupin telling him that he was friends with his dad. And another hint about Lupin because of his boggart turning to a silvery orb, and confirmation that being friends with James meant he also knew Sirius Black. Again, we're going to dive into a lot more detail from that particular lesson in just a bit. But after that lesson, Harry's stewing on the emotion, and he's eating his chocolate because chocolate cures all in this this Dementor world, which just a reminder that I'm sure that I've said on this podcast before and that you are aware of if you are a fan of Harry Potter. The Dementors are a stand-in for the effects of depression, and chocolate is, the remedy because, people like chocolate when they're feeling blue. That's at least the way that I have absorbed that part of this story in the narrative. After said lesson and stewing and emotion and chocolate, what he's doing is trying to convince himself, for the sake of Quidditch, he better stop wanting to hear his parents' voices so that he can actually fight off the Dementors for good. Because Quidditch. And now it's montage time. That's at least how I hear these narrative time jumps that we get, where it just kind of describes time passing. I see them in my head as little montages of Quidditch practice, of Patronus practice. And throughout this, we get a reminder of how much work Hermione is doing with all the classes that she's taking. And Ron still seems to be the only person in the world that gives a shit about that. We've got Oliver Wood, who's still bugging Professor McGonagall about the Firebolt, and that is not going particularly well. He literally told her, and admits this to Harry, that he said he didn't care if the Firebolt threw Harry off as long as he caught the snitch first, which is actually chapter and verse straight quoted from the Oliver Wood Bible for the Quidditch is Life sermon, which meets every Thursday on the Quidditch Pitch. More montage and time jumping is happening. Basically, we know it's cold. We know it's almost Quidditch time, and we know we still have no Firebolt. And we know that it's been about 4 weeks because that's what they tell us about the Patronus practices that have been happening. After 4 weeks, Harry still hasn't figured out or been able to make a fully fledged Patronus. He can make a cloud that can stop a Dementor from continuing to charge towards him, but he can't drive them away with his fully formed Patronus yet. So if I can take some liberty here, he can make a pass blocker, but he's not running the tush push anytime soon. And that joke is going to make sense to about one of my listeners, but it was the best I could do to make a sports analogy instead of one about erectile dysfunction. But it seems he's still holding on to a little bit of wanting to hear his parents, which is why that thing isn't coming full force. And Harry almost, during this final lesson with Lupin that they're talking afterwards, he almost gave away that he's been sneaking to Hogsmeade when he starts drinking with his teacher after a private lesson, which is a thing that happens all the time for 13-year-old boys, and it's always completely appropriate. But the real thing that's happening here between him and Lupin is it's teaching us about the Dementors' kiss and how they literally suck the soul out of a human being, leaving them as just this empty husk of lifelessness, but still breathing. It's particularly pleasant to think about. And this is more to build intrigue and stakes for the climax. Is that's what's going to happen to Sirius Black when he gets caught. Apparently, they actually put that in the paper, which is an interesting thing to do. And you can hear Lupin still struggling with his old friendship when he asks Harry, and they're going back and forth about whether Harry really thinks that someone could deserve that punishment. Could anyone actually deserve that punishment? At least that's what Lupin is posing. But you have to feel like he's doing so not just out of a philosophy and thinking that that is a fate that no human being could have done anything to deserve, but also he was friends with Sirius Black. And even if Sirius Black did something horrible, which he believes he did, does he really want to see that be his fate? But after this particularly fun chat, Professor McGonagall finally brings Harry back his Firebolt. And she reminds him how important it is to win Quidditch, because Quidditch is life. And now that it's back in his life, he's ready to forgive Hermione. And this gives us a moment of foreshadowing in passing as they get to the portrait hole. And, well, they get to the portrait. It's not a hole because Neville is pleading with Sir Cadogan that he wrote the passwords down, but he lost them. That won't be important at all. Once they get inside, everyone wants to touch Harry's broom stick. And as they're trying to chat up Hermione and make nice, Ron decides that he's going to be the one to take the Firebolt up to the dorm to put it away, to keep it safe, and give Scabbers his rat tonic that he needs to give him anyways. Two big things happen at one time. The first is that Harry actually starts to give a shit about Hermione's workload and trying to figure out how she's doing this and why she can't offload a subject or two and just take it easy a little bit. He's actually starting to care about his friend, which is a very novel concept. And then two, Scabbers is gone. There's blood on the sheets. And Ron blames Crookshanks for finally succeeding in eating him. because of some orange hairs he found at the scene of the crime, like some kind of CSI investigator. Ron the Little Orer, even though we don't actually know that term yet in the books, he's the only one that notices Hermione's weird schedule and behaviors all year long, and now he's pulling cat hairs at a murder scene. Unfortunately for him, he doesn't know that his pet rat is a quite skilled and experienced human wizard man who's getting pretty good and adept at faking his own death. Which led me to a random question that I'd like to pose to you. Did Peter Pettigrew have to transform back into a person to stage this? How often does he find himself alone and transform just to stop being a rat for a little while since he's, dropped himself into the Weasleys' lives? Imagine for a moment that little 4-year-old Ginny stumbles into a room that's supposed to be empty, and he finds Ginny finds a 30-year-old man just sitting there. And then she runs off to get her mom, brings her back to see a rat sitting in the same spot. If you're on YouTube, let me know in the comments if that's a thing that you think ever happened, because in my head, totally did. And that's the chapter. Well, it was the chapter before that detour we just took. It's another fairly low-key chapter. There's a lot of descriptions of time passing through the context of the Firebolt being ready for Quidditch or not. It's that anticipation because Quidditch is life. But the in-between has a lot of detail packed into some sort of like subdued moments. The biggest ones are obviously the lessons with Lupin, which we're about to dissect further. But before we do that, I want to ask you, if you are listening on a podcast app, to leave a 5-star rating and review for the podcast. It truly does help the show. It will make me feel all warm and fuzzy, like I just ate some chocolate after fighting Dementors. And also, it will let the evil algorithms know that this show is actually worth being shown to some people, and we can grow the audience of people like you around this show. And if you're watching on YouTube, like the video for the same effect. Now we are in the Lumos segment of the show. This is the part of the show where we light our wand tips and illuminate something from the chapter. I want to talk about Harry and his Patronus lesson, particularly the first one. This is how it goes down. So Lupin found another boggart as a stand-in for a Dementor and explains what a Patronus charm even is and how hard it is to make. So this is to basically set the stage of like Harry is actually good at magic, despite the fact that he doesn't ever actually do magic. It gives us the feeling when he finally succeeds at this that he is particularly powerful, and that could be a way that he might actually live through the end of this book, because when we really break the series down, he's going against one of the most magically gifted dark wizards of like a generation, and he has to have something about him that is powerful, and even more so than just like the excuse of love protection, right? Like he's got to be good at something other than Quidditch, but Quidditch is life. And this Patronus charm is one of those moments where it's like, oh, this is magic far beyond what a 13-year-old should be capable of doing. And Lupin is already teaching him, and he's actually going to get it. And luckily, for the convenience of these lessons, the boy who hears his parents' dying screams when the Dementors come near him has a divination teacher who's been predicting his imminent death since he met her, and has been told by everyone all year long that there's a lunatic murderer that has escaped prison to kill him, not to mention said darkest wizard of the age that people won't even speak his name, a serial killer who's already tried to kill him multiple times and is most definitely going to continue to try to do this. Of all the things for this kid to fear most, luckily, It's a Dementor. And lucky that the fake Boggart Dementor also holds all the same powers as a real Dementor. Lucky indeed. Anyways, we're not going to stew on that. It's also interesting that there is a suggestion that Harry actually wants to hear his mother's screams. Because as horrible as it is, and he reflects on this later too, after the lessons and continuing in the chapter, it's the only way that he can actually hear her voice. And it's that distraction that could be why he fails, particularly at first. It's also very funny that the biggest concern in all of this is if Harry can't fight off a Dementor, they might come to Quidditch again, and they're going to lose the match. Nothing else. There's no other reason for him to want to have these lessons other than Quidditch. Of course. He tries multiple happy memories because that's what Lupin tells him he has to do. He has to be able to really, really focus on the happiest memory of his life, basically, in order to produce a Patronus charm that can project these happy feelings outward in front of him, and that's what the Dementor feeds off of instead of Harry's own, right? That's how this thing is supposed to work. And the memories that he chooses in order, because he tries 3 times. The first one is the first time that he flew on a broom. The second one is the previous year when they won the House Cup. And then the third one is when he first found out that he was a wizard and would leave the Dursleys to go to Hogwarts. This kid doesn't have a lot of happy memories to reach back and choose from. So it makes it interesting to me that he actually ends up being so good at doing this charm, because there's not a lot of happy in Harry's life. We get an evolution too that sort of culminates in this first lesson of the effects that the Dementor is having on Harry when he faces them, whether it's the real ones or the fake ones, right? It starts with just hearing his mother screaming. And that first time back on the train, he didn't even realize it was her necessarily. He just heard a woman screaming. And it's progressively gotten more and more distinct. And he starts to hear his mother pleading and Voldemort laughing, and it gets progressively louder. And then he finally, in the final one, hears his dad and how he tried to hold off Voldemort and let his mom and Harry get away. And then on the third try, the screaming wasn't as pronounced, and he was actually able to make a cloudy Patronus and hold the fake Dementor at bay a little bit. So within that, when you unpack it, these lessons are not only an exploration of depression and stress and, honestly, the silly motivation of a 13-year-old who subscribes to the religion of Oliver Wood, Quidditch is life. They also act as a vessel for filling in some of the backstory and building some intrigue and foreshadow moving forward as well. What Harry hears when the Dementors, even the fake Boggart version, is a reliving of his parents' final moments alive. And this allows him to understand what happened to them the night that Voldemort came to kill him. He now knows that his father stepped in to try to buy them time to get away. He sacrificed himself to give them a chance to live. Could we have a discussion about why this sacrifice didn't work the same as his mother's and protect them from Voldemort? Yeah, I think there's a valid conversation to be had there. The admittedly flimsy explanation I'm clinging to avoid said conversation is that Voldemort didn't give him the option of survival. When he stepped up, Voldemort simply laughed and killed him. Sacrifice, yes, but less of a choice at that final moment. Unless he just ran away to save himself, he was dying that night. And we get more of that backstory later in the books to fill in some more of the gaps. But even in these Dementor moments, we hear a bit of a difference in Harry's mom's screams too. She's saying things like, please not Harry, have mercy, not Harry, things like that. And I believe that I believe that in one of these, we've heard Voldemort say things like stand aside. And that's that element of choice. The element of choice that James didn't get, but Lily did. And I think that's what we're meant to believe is the difference and what makes that sacrifice possible. But also it's giving Harry information, it's giving us information, it's giving us the foundational elements of the series in a lot of ways. And we also get more of that backstory with Lupin. As Harry tells him what he's hearing, we discover that Lupin and James were friends at Hogwarts. And through Harry's immense deductive reasoning skills, that he also knew Sirius Black. And his confirmation here is subtle and interesting at the same time. With words, he says, I knew him, or at least I thought I did. You can see he's still wrestling with that part of his life and that relationship, that friendship. But it's that first reaction, as the book describes it, as a quick turn, a sharp response, and then his face relaxing when Harry explained why he asked in the first place. It's this tense reaction. That's something of someone who's being accused of something. A guilty conscience. This is Lupin not just reacting as if Harry is accusing him, like Snape has been accusing him all year, but he's not just reacting to this idea that perhaps because of their past friendship, he would be willing to help Sirius. It's the guilty conscience that's just that. He is wrestling with the knowledge that he alone knows that Sirius Black is an animagus. And that could be a way that he escaped and is being successfully staying on the run and not recaptured, and perhaps is getting into Hogwarts. But he's trying to convince himself that he's using some kind of dark magic so that he himself can sleep at night and not admit to Dumbledore what they had done as students. And we're going to hear all about that story in the later chapters of this book. In the Patronus part of this lesson, it is educational and important to Harry. You know, he is at school after all. He does have to learn how the magic works if he's going to work the magic. But for us as readers, this is far more important for these details, these emotional reveals, these foundational elements of the series and the plot as it stands for this entire world that's being built around Harry, his whole existence, and the foreshadowing of the climax to this book. There's a lot packed into this one first little lesson that does also get built upon, you know, in the subsequent lessons. But this first one in particular, there's a lot going on in this. And most of it really isn't about whether Harry successfully achieves a Patronus or not. Thanks, Lupin. All right, so before we do anything else, we must give out some house points. In true Hogwarts fashion, these points are completely subjective with no oversight and fully at my discretion. This week, I am giving house points to Lupin for teaching Harry how to protect himself against the Dementors and setting him up to show just how big his wand stick is when he can make a fully fledged Patronus at 13 years old. 150 points. Just like catching a snitch. I hope that I get to work that in when they finally do catch the snitch or the rat. Anyway, the next points I'm going to give out are to Professor McGonagall for giving the Firebolt back so that Harry can dominate in Quidditch. 10 points. And also to Oliver Wood for continuing to push the good word of the Quidditch life. 5 points to Wood. Now I'm going to take away some points from Scabbers, a.k.a. Peter Pettigrew, for ruining the reunion of Ron and Hermione. They were just about to be nice to each other again, and he staged his crime scene in the frame job of Hermione's cat, Crookshanks. I'm taking away 100 points. We need our friendships in these dark times. I am also taking away points from Harry and Ron on a similar premise for continuing to be dicks to Hermione, all because she wants to make sure that Harry isn't murdered by a broom curse. 20 points each. We need our friends in these dark times. Come on, guys. Anyway, before we go, we must expecto plot changeo. Let's rewrite Harry Potter one small change at a time. This expecto plot changeo question from the chapter is, what if Harry's biggest fear really was Voldemort or something other than a Dementor? How could that have changed the events in this chapter, the series? Like perhaps, how would Lupin's lessons have changed to teach him how to make a Patronus in the first place? Could he have taught him at all? The first couple of things that came to mind for me when I posed this question to myself is that maybe they would have had to sneak out of school, took one of the Dementors guarding the school on, like this rogue mission, maybe an adventure to try to get one isolated to make sure that they don't get overpowered by like 100 of them. Or could the story have been tweaked slightly that the Marauders had actually discovered the rumor requirement and that's how it gets its first reveal, and that it simply only doesn't show up on the Marauders map because it's unplottable, not because they didn't know it existed? Maybe, perhaps, possibly, I don't know. You can share your thoughts with me on social media at Belated Binge. You can do so in the comments if you are on YouTube, or you can join the free Facebook group for listeners of this podcast. There is a link in the show notes. I would also be interested if Facebook groups are still a thing that you care about. As listeners of this podcast, would you prefer that it be a Discord server, perhaps, instead of a Facebook group? You tell me whether that's a thing that you would be interested in for our little community. With that, we have reached the end of this episode of Belated Binge. If you enjoyed this, please follow, subscribe on whatever podcast player you are using right now. And as a reminder, if it has a rating and review function, please leave one. Also, check out the additional benefits available on patreon.com/belatedbinge. Thank you for listening. And remember, life is short. Buy the wand, wear the cloak, muffliato the haters, and always tap that little radio with the password, Belated Binge, Harry Potter.